The rain fell hard over the Zarnu market, turning the dirt roads into sticky mud. Neon lights blinked above rusty stalls. Alien traders shouted under plastic covers, trying to sell half-broken tech, old weapons, or rotting fruit. Nobody cared about kindness in this place. Not here. Not in the rain. In the middle of it all, a woman stood, soaking wet, thin, and shivering. Her clothes were torn, her skin pale green and faded. Her arms clutched a small child close to her, chest wrapped in a dirty blanket. The boy didn't move much. His small body trembled. His eyes stayed closed and his breathing was weak. The alien woman cried out, her voice shaking with fear. "Please, someone help my son. He's burning. With fever, he can't breathe." No one stopped. A trader glanced her way and looked away fast. A guard near the market gate laughed and shook his head. "Don't bring sick ones here. Take your dying brat elsewhere." She tried again. "I'll work. I'll clean your ship. I'll sleep on your floor. Just help him, please." Still nothing. A woman selling spice pods tossed a handful of dust at her. "Leave. He'll infect us all." The alien mother backed against a metal wall, holding the child tighter. Her legs gave out, and she slid down into the mud. The child whimpered once, a weak sound. His skin had strange glowing spots. Blue lights beneath his flesh pulsed slowly like a dying star. And still no one came. Until one man stopped walking. He wore a soaked brown coat and boots covered in mud. A human. Tall, bearded, with dark eyes that didn't look away. He stood, still, watching her. The alien woman looked up at him with tired eyes, unsure if he would scream too or call a guard. Instead, the man stepped closer and knelt beside her. "Is he dying?" he asked in a calm voice. The woman blinked. "What?" I said. "Is your son dying?" Her lips trembled. I think so. He hasn't eaten in 2 days. His body is burning. I tried giving him street water, but he just coughs more." The human placed a hand on the child's forehead. It was hot, too hot, and the glow under his skin, it wasn't normal, but the boy was still breathing, still alive. "What's his name?" the man asked. "Teal," she whispered. The man nodded. "My name is Mark." He took off his coat and wrapped it around both of them. Then he looked into the woman's eyes. "Come with me, I'll help." She froze. You don't want money?" "No." "You don't want to sell me?" Mark shook his head. "I fix broken things. Let's see if I can fix this." People stared as Mark helped the woman up and lifted the boy into his arms. He carried Teal like he was carrying something precious, even though the child was soaked, shivering, and glowing strangely. The woman followed, limping. A trader called out, "Hey, human! You'll regret that. Cursed blood brings cursed luck." Mark didn't answer. He just kept walking through the rain. Outside the city, past the power towers and half-dead trees, Mark's small repair hut stood hidden between rocks. It was nothing fancy, just a round metal shelter, some old solar panels, and an antenna that barely worked. But it was warm and safe. Inside, Mark laid Teal on a soft bench and gave the mother a dry towel. "Sit. Rest. I'll make something warm." The woman didn't know what to say. Her hands shook as she dried. Her face. The warmth felt like a dream. Mark returned with a small pot of hot soup. He fed Teal slowly, bit by bit, until the boy's lips moved. The glowing under his skin flickered. Then Teal coughed, but it was strong. Real. "He's trying," Mark said. "That's good." The woman sat on the floor, tears falling freely now. Why are you helping us?" Mark sat beside her. "Because everyone else walked away." She looked at him. "But we're nothing. We're dirty. He stopped her gently. "You're a mother. And that boy's still alive." "That's enough reason," she wiped her face. "My name is Saya." Mark smiled softly. "Nice to meet you, Saya." The wind howled outside, but inside, Something had changed. For the first time in days, Teal slept without coughing. And for the first time in her life, Saya didn't feel invisible. But neither of them saw the red light blinking on the boy's back, hidden under the skin, pulsing slowly, watching, sending a signal. Someone out there knew he was still alive, and they were coming. Mark had seen many strange things while traveling across forgotten planets. Crashed ships, wounded soldiers, even alien creatures that glowed like fireflies. But nothing stayed with him like the image of that sick child wrapped in a ragged blanket, barely breathing in the rain. Now, the child, Teal, lay resting on a soft bench inside Mark's small repair hut. The fever hadn't gone, but it had stopped rising. His breathing was slow but steady. The glowing under his skin still pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat powered by something not entirely natural. Across the room, the boy's mother, Saya, watched him with tired eyes. She had barely spoken since Mark brought them in. She sat quietly, her back against the metal wall, fingers wrapped around a hot mug of broth. Mark worked in silence nearby, using his scanner to check for signs of infection. He wasn't a doctor, but he had patched up enough broken machines and damaged bodies to know when something was wrong. And something was definitely wrong. Teal's blood readings were strange. His cells were too active, like they were building something inside his body. It wasn't a normal illness, this wasn't a virus, this was designed. Mark looked over at Saya. "Did you ever take him to a medic?" She shook her head. "No one would see us. I showed them his symptoms. They saw the glow and slammed the door. They called him cursed. Said he'd infect their homes." Mark frowned. "He's not cursed. He's different. Something's been done to him." Saya looked scared. "What do you mean?" Mark tapped his screen. "This boy's body isn't just fighting sickness, it's evolving, changing. I think someone altered his biology, maybe even before he was born." Saya covered her mouth. "You think they experimented on my son?" "I think someone wants him to become something else," Mark said quietly. "And they didn't expect him to survive." Suddenly, Teal stirred. His eyes opened halfway. He looked at Saya, then at Mark. "Hungry," the boy whispered. Saya dropped to her knees beside him, brushing his hair. "I'm here, baby. You're safe." Mark handed her a small bowl of warm porridge. She fed it to Teal slowly, and this time he didn't cough. He ate. It was a small miracle. That night, the wind howled around the hut. The skies outside turned violet, flashing with storm clouds. The sand carried strange whispers. But inside, the room was warm, calm. Saya finally spoke. "My people were once healers," she said. "Before the war, before the labs. I worked in a garden once, growing light plants to treat fever." Mark looked up. "What happened?" "We lost the war. The scientists came. They told us we had special genes. They said they wanted to help." Her voice broke. "I was pregnant. They said it wouldn't harm the baby. They lied." Mark sat down beside her. "And when Teal was born?" "He glowed on the first night. The elders panicked. Some said he was a blessing. Others said he was a mistake. In the end, we were thrown out." Mark stayed quiet for a while, then said, "I've seen how cruel this galaxy can be to the weak, but I've also seen how strong mothers become when there's nothing left." Saya looked at him, tears in her eyes. "You don't know us. Why? Didn't you walk away?" Mark shrugged. "Because you were sitting in the rain begging for help and your child was dying. I didn't need to know your name to care." She stared at him. "No one's ever said something like that to me." Mark gave a half smile. "Maybe it's time someone did." In the early morning, while Saya slept beside Teal, Mark noticed something strange on the scanner, a small pulse, like a signal, coming from inside the boy. Mark leaned closer. It was a transmitter, hidden in the child's back, just beneath the skin. A faint red light blinked slowly. Someone had tagged Teal like property, and it had been active since the night before. His stomach dropped. He walked to the comm station and turned on the jamming field. It wouldn't hide them forever, but it would stop any signal from reaching orbit for now. Then he returned to the bench and looked down at Teal. Who would do this to a child? And worse, who was coming now that they knew he was still alive? Mark didn't sleep that night. He just sat at the window, watching the storm, a blaster resting in his lap. Not because he wanted a fight, but because this time, he wasn't going to let anyone take a child who still had a chance to live. Not while he was still breathing. The morning sun never touched Mark's hut. Storm clouds covered the sky in shades of deep gray and green, casting long shadows across the land. Inside, silence filled the small home, until Teal woke up screaming. Mark dropped the tools in his hand and rushed into the room. Saya was already there, holding the boy tightly. Teal's body glowed again, brighter this time. Blue lines ran under his skin, pulsing like liquid light. "He's burning again," Saya cried, brushing her son's damp forehead. "His heart is beating too fast." Mark grabbed his medical scanner and held it over the child's chest. The screen flashed warnings. Unknown organ activity detected, accelerated blood regeneration, unstable cellular growth. "What does it mean?" Saya asked, eyes wide with fear. Mark stared at the data. "I don't think this is a sickness anymore." Saya looked down at her boy. "Then what is it?" Mark swallowed hard. "Your son is mutating." 2 hours later, Mark sat in front of his old computer, trying to decode the data from Teal's transmitter. It wasn't just tracking. It was recording. Dozens of signals had already been sent out, sending vital signs, location, and genetic reports. "This thing has been broadcasting him like a lab rat," Mark muttered. He finally broke through one encrypted layer. A project name appeared. Project Dawnseed. Subject Nauru 17. Active. Mark leaned back in his chair. He'd heard whispers of Dawnseed during the war. A secret program meant to engineer evolution. The goal was to create children who could survive any climate, resist any disease, and one day, replace the fragile ones. Replace humans. Replace everyone. And now one of those test subjects, a child who wasn't supposed to survive, was in his care. Meanwhile, in the bedroom, Saya sat beside Teal, wiping his face. He had fallen asleep again, but his small hands kept twitching like he was dreaming of something loud, something painful. She brushed his hair back gently. "You didn't ask to be born like this," she whispered. "You didn't deserve this burden." Then she looked out the window and saw Mark standing near the generator, face heavy with thought. He looked different now. Not just a kind man, but a man preparing for something. That evening, Mark brought food to the table, hot broth and soft bread. Saya and Teal sat quietly, the boy still weak but able to eat small bites. "I found out what he is," Mark said softly. "He's part of a program called Dawnseed. They were experimenting on children, trying to build the next version of life." Saya's hand trembled. "So he's not natural?" "No," Mark said, "but he's still real. He still laughs. He still feels. He still matters." She nodded slowly. "What will they do if they find him?" Mark's jaw tightened. "They'll take him. They'll either use him or silence him." Saya looked at her son, then at Mark. "Then we can't let that happen." Later, while Teal napped again, Mark sat near the window with a small pulse rifle across his lap. He didn't like weapons, but he'd learned long ago that kindness didn't always win without strength beside it. Saya sat near him, arms crossed. "I don't know how to fight," she admitted. "I only ever ran." Mark nodded. "Running is still surviving." She looked at him. "Why are you doing this? You could walk away." Mark looked at her for a long time. "Because you didn't leave him. Not when he was glowing. Not when he was burning. Not when the whole city turned its back on you." He looked down at the weapon in his lap. Any mother willing to face the galaxy alone for her child deserves someone who won't let her do it alone anymore. Saya's breath caught. She looked away, blinking fast. "You talk like no human I've met before." Mark gave a soft smile. Maybe you just met the wrong ones. Suddenly, the early warning sensor buzzed. Mark stood up fast and looked at the radar. A small ship, unmarked, silent, and low-flying, was heading straight toward them. "They found us," he whispered. Saya grabbed her son and held him close. Mark turned on the jamming field again and locked the door. He looked at her. "Get him to the basement now. But what about you? I'll stay. I'll buy you time if they land." "Mark, I said go." She didn't argue. With Teal in her arms, Saya ran to the lower hatch and disappeared. Mark stood alone, now facing the door. His heart beat hard, but his hands were steady. This wasn't about being a hero, it was about protecting a child, one who had been born into pain, into silence, and was finally being given a reason to live. The desert wind howled louder than ever, but Mark didn't flinch. He stood in front of his repair hut, rifle in hand, eyes fixed on the black dot in the sky growing larger by the second. It wasn't a transport, it wasn't a trader, it was a hunter ship, silent, fast, and deadly. Behind him, the hidden basement door had been sealed. Saya and Teal were below, surrounded by old supplies and spare fuel tanks. He'd locked the hatch tight just in case. Mark had fought in one war. He thought that part of his life was behind him. But now he wasn't fighting for a planet or a paycheck. He was fighting for a sick child, and the mother who had been brave enough to keep that child alive when the whole galaxy turned away. The hunter ship landed 20 meters away, its wings folded up like blades. The doors hissed. 3 figures stepped out, tall, armored. Not soldiers, retrievers, built for one thing, taking back escaped assets. One of them spoke in a cold, robotic voice. "Subject to 17 detected. Surrender the child." Mark didn't move. "You're not taking him." The middle retriever scanned him. "You are a civilian. Unregistered. You do not have authority to protect genetic property of Project Dawnseed." Mark raised the rifle. "Try me." The retriever tilted its head. "Lethal force authorized." The first shot came fast. Mark rolled. Behind the fuel container, sparks flying as plasma blasts ripped through the metal wall behind him. He fired twice. One shot hit a retriever in the chest. No damage. Their armor was stronger than he remembered. He needed to slow them, not kill them. He smashed the power conduit beside him. Wires hissed and blew, sending fire and smoke across the entrance. The retrievers paused, recalculating through the chaos. Inside the basement, Saya held Teal close. The boy was glowing again, but this time not from fever. His body pulsed with energy, bright, steady. "Mama," he whispered, "they're here." "I know," she said, voice shaking, "but Mark is too." Suddenly, Teal grabbed her wrist. "I can help." "No, you're too weak." He looked up at her, eyes glowing white-blue. "I don't want to hide anymore." Back outside, Mark was down to his last power cell. One of the retrievers had flanked him. He ducked behind the broken antenna tower as another blast missed him by inches. They were moving closer. Mark gritted his teeth. "I hope you're watching, kid, because I'm running out of tricks." Then, a voice echoed through the smoke. "Stop." The retrievers froze. Mark turned and saw Teal standing at the top of the ramp, Saya beside him. The child's skin shimmered, like crystal. His eyes glowed bright and sparks danced around his fingers. One of the retrievers spoke. "Subject has triggered genetic defense protocol. Level 3 threat confirmed." Mark shouted, "Get back inside!" But Teal raised his hands calmly. "I'm not a weapon," he said. The air trembled. The retriever stepped forward, but too late. Teal took a deep breath and released light. Not fire, not plasma, just pure energy. It rolled out like a wave. Slow, soft, silent. The smoke cleared. The wind stopped. The retrievers froze mid-step. Their systems sparked. One dropped to its knees. Another turned and tried to run, but its legs gave out. One by one, the retrievers collapsed. Their armor shorted. Their visors cracked. Teal fell to his knees. "Mama!" Saya rushed forward and caught him before he hit the ground. Mark ran too, dropping beside them. Is he okay? He's breathing, Saya whispered. But he's tired. Mark picked him up, holding him gently. Let's go. More might come. Later that night, the three of them sat near the fire in the back room. Teal was wrapped in soft blankets, finally sleeping in peace. His body didn't glow anymore. His skin looked normal. For now. Mark stared at the empty space outside through the cracked door. The retriever ship hadn't sent a distress call. He'd jammed it in time, but he knew this wouldn't be the last. You saw what he did, Saya whispered beside him. He's not just a boy anymore. Mark nodded. He's something new, something the galaxy didn't prepare for, and you still want to protect him? Mark looked at her. Now more than ever. Saya reached over and touched his hand. Not with fear, not with sorrow, but with gratitude. You stayed, she said. Even when death landed outside your door, you stayed. Mark squeezed her hand gently. And I always will. The next day, the desert was quiet again, but Mark didn't trust the silence. It was the kind of silence that came before a storm. He stood outside, watching the broken ground where the retriever ship had landed just hours ago. The burnt marks were still fresh. Metal pieces from their armor lay scattered across the sand like warning signs. Inside the hut, Saya sat by Teal's side, gently stroking his hair. The boy slept deeply, his face finally calm. But the glow in his skin wasn't gone. It had just settled, like a fire waiting to rise again. Saya hadn't spoken much since the attack, but now she turned to Mark as he walked in. I want to fight, she said quietly. Mark looked at her surprised. You already did. You've kept him alive through things most people couldn't survive. No, she said firmly. I mean, really fight. Like you. Mark sat across from her. You don't need to be a soldier. I need to be something more than a mother who hides, Saya said, her eyes sharp now. They will come again. And if they take him, if they take my son, I will never forgive myself. Mark studied her face. She was still tired, still healing. But something inside her had changed. She wasn't the same woman crying in the rain market anymore. All right, he said. I'll train you. The next morning, Saya stood in the open space behind the hut holding a training staff in her shaking hands. Mark stood a few steps away. Grip tighter, not too stiff. Let your arms move. She followed his steps. Her strikes were clumsy at first, but her balance was strong. She didn't complain. She didn't stop. For hours they trained, sweat, dirt, and silence between each swing. When she fell, she got up. When she missed, she tried again. And when her arms gave out, she simply said, again. Mark wasn't gentle, but he was patient. He knew what it meant when a parent decided they would no longer run. Later that night, Saya sat by the fire with sore muscles and a bruised wrist. Teal had woken for a short time and asked for food. He had smiled at her weakly. That smile gave her more strength than any weapon. Mark handed her a warm pack for her arm. You're learning fast. I'm learning slow, she said with a tired grin. You're learning real, Mark replied. And that's what counts. Saya looked down at her hands. I used to grow healing plants. I didn't even know how to raise my voice, let alone a weapon. But they made me change. No, Mark said gently. You changed. Not because of them. Because of him. She looked at her son, still sleeping near the wall, wrapped in blankets. I used to be afraid to breathe too loud, she whispered. Now I want them to hear me coming. The warning alarm beeped the next morning. Mark ran to the radar screen. Another signal. 2 ships. Faster. Bigger. Not just retrievers. These were cleansers. They didn't come to take. They came to erase. Mark grabbed his weapon. We can't fight them directly. Saya grabbed hers too. Then we fight them cleverly. He turned to her. You sure? She nodded. If we die protecting what's right. They didn't. Wait for the ships to land. Mark and Saya set traps in the sand, tripwires, EMP spikes, and smoke charges. Saya climbed onto the rocks, taking the high position. Mark stayed low near the hut, guarding the entry point. The ships landed with a sound like thunder. Doors opened. Shadows moved. 4 armored soldiers stepped out, their faces hidden. One carried a flame cannon. Another held a scanner. They spoke no words. They didn't ask. They just advanced. Saya waited. She let them come close. Then she threw the first charge. Boom. A flash of light. The scanner unit dropped instantly. Its visor shattered. Mark fired from the ground, hitting another in the knee. The flames roared but missed. One soldier aimed at the hut toward Teal. Saya didn't scream. She jumped from the rocks and slammed into him mid-air, knocking him backward. She hit him again, until his helmet cracked. He grabbed her by the throat, but she remembered what Mark taught her. She twisted, elbowed his jaw, and drove her blade into his side. He fell. She stood, coughing, covered in dust, breathing, alive. When it was over, the ships were burning. The last soldier crawled away before collapsing in the sand. Saya dropped beside Mark near the hut, both of them bleeding, exhausted, but victorious. She looked at the smoke. They'll send more. Mark nodded. Then we prepare better. She looked toward the door where Teal now stood, awake, watching. His eyes weren't afraid anymore. The fires from the battle still smoldered as Mark guided his ship through the canyons of the wastelands. He sat at the controls, bruised and silent, flying low to avoid satellites. Beside him sat Saya, one hand resting protectively on her son's back as he slept across her lap. Teal had not spoken much since the attack. His energy levels were low and his glowing skin had faded to a soft pulse. But his breathing was calm now. Not sick, not panicked, just tired. They had no more time to wait. That's why Mark was flying toward a place few remembered, and fewer dared to go. The buried base. An old Earth outpost built during the early years of the colonial expansion, long forgotten after the war. He had found it once by accident years ago, hidden beneath the dunes. Now it would become their best chance at peace. Hours passed before the ship finally landed in a narrow canyon. The entrance to the base was buried beneath sand and rock. From above, it looked like nothing but broken ground. But Mark pressed an old code into a disguised panel near the rocks. The door responded with a long hiss, then opened into darkness. They stepped inside. The air was dry, the halls echoed, the lights flickered but worked. Will it keep them out? Saya asked. Carrying Teal carefully, Mark nodded. It's off all maps, no signal, no trackers, we'll be ghosts here. They found a room with working beds and sealed doors. It wasn't warm, but it was safe. That was enough. Saya laid Teal down, brushing the hair from his forehead. He's getting thinner. He needs rest. He needs time, Mark said, adjusting an old air filter near the wall. She turned toward him. He needs more than hiding. He needs answers. Mark paused, then walked to the next room. Then it's time I show you something. Down in the lowest chamber of the base, Mark unlocked a vault and pulled out an old data core. Dust fell from it. I recovered this from a Dawnseed wreck years ago, he explained. Didn't understand it then. But now I think it's about Teal. He placed the core into the mainframe. The screen flickered. A faded logo appeared. Dawnseed Genetic Initiative. File access, black level, the recording played. A scientist's voice echoed through the room. Calm. Cold. Subject 17 continues to survive unstable mutations. Unlike previous prototypes, he shows emotional control and high empathy responses. Unexpected side effect. Activation only occurs when exposed to protective stimuli. Hypothesis. Mother-child bond triggers internal energy burst. This unit may be the first viable hybrid. Saya stared at the screen, hand covering her mouth. They made him a weapon of love? She whispered. Mark nodded slowly. They didn't expect him to live. But your love, your protection, changed him. You made his mutation stable. Saya stepped back, tears filling her eyes. All this time I thought I was just keeping him alive. I didn't know I was the reason he survived. He didn't just survive, Mark said gently. He became more. She wiped her face and looked at the screen. Can they make more like him? Mark shook his head. They tried. 17. Came after 16 failed. After 15 exploded. After 14 lost all brain function. They kept failing. But only one child, born with heart, raised in love, became something they couldn't control. Back in the main room, Teal opened his eyes slowly. He heard voices. He heard the word, weapon. He sat up, knees to chest, hugging himself. When Saya returned, he didn't look at her. I'm not normal, he whispered. No, she said softly. She knelt in front of him. You're not. He looked up at her, tears forming. Then what am I? She pulled him into her arms. You're mine. Later that night, they lit a fire inside the old base. The warmth danced across the walls. Mark made simple soup using what little food was left. Teal ate with both hands. Saya smiled at him, brushing dirt from his cheek. Mark looked at them both. You could stay here, for good. I can reinforce the walls, grow food under the lights. We don't have to run anymore. Saya looked around the base, its broken corners and old scars, and she nodded. It's not a palace, she said, but it's the first place no one has tried to throw us out. Teal reached across the table, placing his small hand over Mark's. Thank you for not giving me away. Mark smiled gently. You were never mine to give. But now, you're mine to protect. The days that followed were the quietest they had ever known. Deep inside the old Earth base, surrounded by rock and silence, Mark, Saya, and Teal lived not as fugitives, but as something new. Something they had never been before. A family. Mark spent his mornings checking the power cells and patching the roof. It still leaked dust when the wind was high, but it held strong. Saya had started growing plants in old hydro tanks, tiny green leaves rising from nutrient gel. She hummed softly while she worked, her voice finally free of fear. Teal. He laughed now, not loudly, not all the time, but enough to remind them that life was more than running and hiding. He drew pictures on the walls with chalk, of stars, of birds, and always, of the three of them standing side by side. One evening, Mark found him sitting alone in the corner, holding an old metal bolt like a toy. Thinking about something? Mark asked. Teal looked up. About names. What kind of names? Yours. Mark blinked. Mine? Teal nodded. You saved us. You stayed. You fixed me when I was breaking. Mark sat beside him. I didn't fix you, Teal. You were never broken. You just needed time, safety, someone to see you. Teal tilted his head. But you're not just someone. You're... He hesitated. Then he whispered. Can I call you father? The words hit Mark like a soft wind, but strong enough to shake something deep inside. He had lived alone for years, worked alone, slept alone. He had seen too many people walk away, too many good things lost in war. He never thought anything could reach him again. But this small voice, this small boy with glowing skin and glowing heart, had broken through everything. Mark nodded, unable to speak. Teal smiled. When Saya entered and saw the two sitting quietly, she could feel something had shifted. She sat beside Mark and looked at Teal. What did you ask him? I asked if he could be my father, Teal said proudly. Saya smiled. It was soft, but full of something unspoken. Mark glanced at her. Are you okay with that? She reached for his hand. I was hoping he'd ask you first. Time passed. Seasons on this outside changed, though they couldn't see it underground. But inside, life moved forward. Teal's glowing had calmed, now appearing only when he felt strong emotion, joy, fear, or love. It was no longer dangerous. It was part of him. Mark taught him how to read Earth books. Saya taught him how to grow. Food. Together, they built a life no one could steal from them. One night, Teal had a nightmare. He ran into their shared room, shaking. Mark lifted him into his arms, held him tight. "You're safe," he whispered. "No one can take you now." Teal buried his face in Mark's chest. "They'll never take me from you, right?" "Never," Mark promised, "because now you're not alone." Outside, far beyond the hills, the galaxy continued to turn. Ships flew. Governments argued. Scientists whispered about a boy who had once escaped Project Dawnseed, Subject 17, the one that lived. Some said he had died. Others said he had disappeared forever. But none could find him, and none ever would. One day, Teal stood in the main hall of the base and stared at the chalk drawings he had made. Then he picked up a small, red stone and began to write one word above them: home. Mark watched from behind him. "That's a good word." Teal looked back. "I didn't know what it meant before, but now I do." "And what's it mean to you?" Mark asked. Teal grinned. "It means family, and safety, and a place where I can just be." Mark placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then that's what we'll protect, no matter what." In a corner of the base, Saya added a final touch to their new life. A small wooden sign nailed into the wall. It read, "We weren't made by the galaxy. We made ourselves. Together." That night, the three of them sat around the fire pit. Mark stirred a pot of stew, badly overcooked but full of flavor. Saya laughed when he dropped the spoon. Teal threw tiny pebbles at him, giggling. No fear, no alarms, no shadows in the sky, just laughter and light.